Hey, welcome back. This time we're looking at Hotline Miami, the review. I finished the game before reviewing it, which puts this at the second game I think I did that with, like immediately finished before reviewing it. This is my latest review for Hotline Miami. It's fairly hefty as I figured I'd have to do this game justice in my review. Hotline Miami is exclusively for Windows. That kind of dates how old this game is, as I think it came out on Vita. Since then, I got my copy off Steam. I apologize that this video is louder than most. I really need to sort out this whole volume thing sometimes. So I had a sense of self-awareness. In other news, I got a 360 recently. That's interesting. I'd review some games, but I don't have anything to record console on. Learn to type mini-me. The only game I have at the moment is Fable 2, and it's great fun. I actually barely remember getting a 360. Did play a lot of Fable 2, but anyway, absolutely great review, mate. I remember being probably most proud of this review at the time of release. That's kind of the only thing I really, truly remember about it. But regardless, let's enjoy Hotline Miami review for PC. Immediately, we've got black bars everywhere, which I seem to do a few times. Don't do that. Also, white text on this background is hard to read and horrible to look at.
Hotline Miami is a hyper-stylized, extremely violent top-down action game set in the 80s that is one of my favorite releases of 2012. It's one of the most thrilling games I have ever played, and it combines twitch reactions, tactical depth, and timing together perfectly. You play as a nameless mask-wearing contract killer who receives jobs over the phone to get into a certain building and kill everyone. This is what you'll be doing throughout most of the game, and you start to get into a routine of answering the phone, getting into the car, selecting a mask, killing a bunch of guys in a building, walking back to your car, collecting your so-called free gift.
So I guess I learned from my Tony Hawk's Pro Skate HD review that it's good to just talk and talk and talk. A few awkwardly spaced gaps between sentences where I take breaths and you can hear a click and the audio cuts and all that stuff as usual. I think it jumps too quickly into the structure of the game without talking about the game's mechanics. So if the first thing I say is, this game's really good, it's really thrilling, I like it, which is true by the way, I still play Hotline Miami occasionally, fantastic game. Without going into the mechanics and just going into how the missions are structured, I think is a little awkward. Like if I'm like, you turn up this place, you kill a heap of people, then you leave the place, I'd talk straight up about the mechanics first, just so there's a bit of context for the structure of the game, if that makes sense.
And then doing it all again. The game is very violent, and despite its pixely visuals, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. That being said, it isn't completely tasteless. The game does make you feel guilty about the extreme violence in a few ways, and later on in the story, the game even presents an interesting commentary on violence in video games, but I won't spoil it. One of the most interesting ways this game makes you feel guilty is the way that after the mission you have to walk back.
Apologies if the volume was too quiet at the start there. I said interesting like 3 times in a row or 2 times in a row, then like just came across a bit awkward. And normally these days, if I say that like something interesting happens in the game, but I won't spoil it, normally these days I just don't care. Like I'll give a spoiler warning and just talk about it, because if it is interesting enough to talk about it, then I should talk about it instead of just tease it.
Back to your car. The music slows to a surreal ambience as you walk over the multitudes of bloody corpses that you killed. The fast-paced, intense gameplay makes you forget that you're killing people in this game, and once the mission is over, having to walk back to the car is a real guilt trip.
The cutscene following my point then was topical and fitted the point, but was a little bit too long. And I still think that the game is quite effective at doing that. It's a weird point to open with. Again, I'm talking about some of the more like intricate details about this game without talking about the actual mechanics yet. Whereas I think structuring a review should probably be the other way around. So you can be like, here's how the game plays, and this is why it's interesting, and this is some of the nice little touches. I feel like is a better way to structure a review than to be just like, here's the nice little touches this game has, and then talking about what it actually does, because that's a little bit awkwardly structured. But still, the points I've made so far are way more interesting than most of my previous reviews.
Although the story definitely plays a role in making this game as good as it is, it's the gameplay that really steals the show for this game. It has a perfect learning curve, and as I said, it combines twitch reaction gameplay with tactical depth perfectly. You often need to plan your attacks and time them perfectly, and a millisecond could decide between the fate of your character, which makes it extremely intense. The first time I went through the missions, I don't think I took a single...
It's awkward wording again. And also, I don't want to repeat my point, but I'm talking about the pacing of the game without talking about like how the game actually plays. Or I'm talking like you have a split second to do things, but what do you do? Like, what am I doing?
breath. You go through each mission taking out enemies mainly by punching them, shooting them, using melee weapons, throwing weapons at them, and smashing them with doors. Each different mechanic has advantages and disadvantages, and the combination of these mechanics provides a lot of variety for the player. You would think that the high level of difficulty would be frustrating.
I don't really explain how the game feels through its control, like how it actually controls. I just say like the activities you can do. And I know that sounds really nitpicky, but saying something like you can shoot guns and slam doors on people, but like I guess maybe it's a little redundant because you can see the footage, but asking how you can shoot guns or how you can do this or how it all works is probably a better question or a better thing to answer in a review. Also, at some point I think I fixed the like black bars around the screen, which is nice. I think that might have just been a thing at the start.
But it really isn't for two main reasons. One is that it is your fault when you screw up, never the game's fault, sort of like Demon's Souls. The other reason is that it adopts the instant retry mechanic that Super Meat Boy popularized, making it so that you respawn instantly when you die. The levels are short, so this works really well. Each time you die, it simply makes you want to finish the level even more.
God, the music in this game was good. Yeah, I think that was a pretty fair thing to say. I know I'm sort of hypercritical of this review so far, but honestly, I think it's a lot better than everything I've made yet. Like that seemed like a good place to cut the pure gameplay footage off and start talking again. Oh, there you go.
Risk and reward plays a massive role in Hotline Miami, and I think the simple concept of risk and reward plays a huge role in making a game addictive, which the older Tony Hawk's games showcase perfectly. Hotline Miami creates this sense of risk and reward in its gameplay.
I remember thinking I was so smart writing about risk and reward and game design and all that, but watching it now, it's like no shit. And then also bringing up Tony Hawk for like no reason. It's like the old Tony Hawk's games are quite addictive, and then just talking about something else is completely random and terrible.
In a few different ways. One of the main ways it creates risk and reward is how you have to finish off your enemies after light attacks. Punching enemies, hitting them with doors, or throwing blunt weapons at enemies doesn't kill them. It just knocks them out, so you'll either have to finish them off or they get back up. You can't move or attack when finishing off an enemy, so if you get caught doing it, you're probably gonna die. But if you don't bother finish off the enemy, they'll simply get back up and remain to be a threat. The second main way this game creates risk and reward is through the firearms that aren't silenced.
These are good points. This is something I think I'd say today if I was reviewing this.
They kill most enemies in one hit, but the noise can attract more enemies towards your position, leaving the player tossing up whether it's worth it to use firearms or not. A more subtle way of risk and reward is represented through the throwing of sharp weapons. Throwing them
I think my wording is a little awkward, but otherwise still good points. Like saying like a more subtle way of this happening is represented through, like I guess this is very much a stylistic thing that I just don't think I pulled off back then and don't do a lot of these days, but it sounds a lot more formal, which is what I was going for. Just a stylistic thing.
does not always kill an enemy. If the handle of a blade hits an enemy before the blade does, they'll be knocked unconscious instead of killed, so you shouldn't rely on the throwing of knives to kill an enemy.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's some good analysis. Good job, me. This long ass stretch of gameplay is annoying me, especially late in the video when viewer attention starts to fade. but at least the music and the game is kind of fun to watch. I mean, at least the music's good.
There's an intentionally small amount of enemy types, totaling at 3 not including boss battles. You have the standard henchmen, dogs, and big suited guys. Big guys have a lot of health and seem to die only by firearms, and dogs are extremely quick and don't seem to be affected by light attacks. The variety in enemy types is extremely welcome, as it keeps the player thinking about how to handle the different enemies. To add to this game's replayability, it has a scoring system which gives you unlocks. Hotline Miami scores you on a multitude of things. It encourages traits such as boldness, speed, and variety. It's addictive trying to beat your own high scores, and unlocks include weapons, which you find in the levels, and new animal masks, which give you power-ups, such as starting with a knife.
This isn't really that bad. I just sound kind of bored. That's kind of my main thing. I also think the black bars are something that the menus did at the start, in case we're still thinking about that. At this point, I'm a little bored and want to close the video. Probably just because I'm not... Like, these are... I don't know. I feel like these are things I could have said earlier. I don't know. Let's keep...
Taking more bullets before dying, and having dogs ignore you. These masks make the game more replayable, though I think they make some missions a bit too easy. It's worth noting that the controls in this game are responsive and perfect, even with a mouse and keyboard. WASD is move, mouse is aim, left click is primary attack.
See, this is something I shouldn't be saying 5 minutes and 42 seconds into a 7-minute video. I'm talking about like how the game basically functions right at the end, which doesn't make sense.
Right click is pick up weapon and throw weapon. Spacebar is finish off unconscious enemy. Shift...
Like if I was to restructure this, I'd be like, so it's this game where you can do these things. Here's how it controls. Here's how it feels. Then I'd get into some of the more like, this is how it's structured. You get into this routine of going through these missions and, you know, you feel guilty after running across all the corpses. And then maybe, oh no, in here somewhere I'd also talk about the risk and reward stuff, which I think was the best point I've made in this video. And then like, I don't know, amalgamate everything, summarize at the end. But that's a more typical structure. I'm not saying this is the best way to, I'm not saying that's the best way to make a review. I just think it would have worked better here.
Shift is for looking further in front of you, and middle mouse button is lock on. Locking onto enemies is really handy whilst planning to take out a room, as you can choose who to take out first in the room before...
See, I talked about, like, how throwing a knife is a risky prospect in this game before I talked about how you can lock on to enemies, which if I'm doing a review where I do talk about those basics and it's not like some analysis aimed at people who've already played the game, then I should probably cover that first. Sorry if I'm repeating myself.
Before you enter, and it's a guaranteed hit. Locking on is not handy when people are running for you, however, as the cursor has to be directly above an enemy to lock onto them, which is too much effort to bother with while in the middle of a battle, as you might as well just attack the enemy if you're aiming at them.
It's fair.
There are a couple of inconsistencies in the AI
Hear my dog barking there. That dog's name's Pookie. She lives in Tasmania now.
that aren't anywhere near game breaking, but they're a bit out of place. Enemy AI only react to your gunshots, and not their teammates' gunshots, which seems a bit weird. Also, the AI don't seem to be fazed by seeing their dead teammates. You can chop a guy in half, and if an enemy comes across him but not you, he won't take any notice at all. For a game with such a gritty, realistic concept, it seems a bit weird that the AI are like this. Also, the pacing of the story seems a bit off. The story only really starts to get interesting too late in the game, but it's by all means engaging without the story anyway. I really liked the vibe and music in this game. It reminded me a lot of Scarface due to its 80s setting, the synth beats, and the over-the-top violence. It's intentionally a very over-the-top game.
It's funny, you can hear my birds and my dog. The Scarface comparison is something that I probably could have said at the start as well, although, you know, you can't cram everything into the start. Yeah, so far this isn't too bad. Like, if I knew that I was if I wasn't me, and I knew that a 16-year-old made this, I'd say, yeah, there's some potential here if they develop it.
And I love it. The level design is very well thought out, and although you can complete the story in a mere 4 hours, it's extremely addictive to go back and try different things to beat your own high scores. As I said, this is one of the best releases I've come across from this last year, and I highly recommend it. You can find Hotline Miami on Steam right now.
Interesting. At the end there, I said the level design was really interesting and really good and really well designed, but I never actually talked about the level design in the review, which I think I should have done. I think that would have been a more interesting point than some of the things I said. But the risk and reward stuff was pretty good. Only 128 views for 7 likes and a comment 3 years ago, which I think was after I privated it. Oh no, I guess it wouldn't have been. Yeah, I think this one's pretty good. I think this is probably the best one yet. I know I just kind of ragged on it the whole time, but it feels like this one's at a higher standard to the others, to the point where I could talk about what I was actually saying rather than how the review was put together. Even though there were still long stretches of gameplay, they weren't too long and they were always relevant. I mean, some of them were too long, but they weren't as long as previous reviews, which is something the Pro Skater HD review did better. But even still, I actually think this is the best one yet. Hotline Miami review. So I'm being self-indulgent and continuing this series. Yeah, cool. Up next is Fear 2, which I'm not sure if I finished the game. I don't think I did. Prince of Persia was a shocking one. Screamer 2, Far Cry 2 was a big one, I remember. Blood Rain, Super Hang-On. A 20-minute Pro Skater 2 review, which is a behemoth. We'll get there. And then our first public video is somewhat soon. Not really, but soon. This is our second last video of 2012. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Look forward to... Oh, hang on. The Wanted review should be out by the time you see this video. I just recorded my Q&A, so if you haven't already, you check that out. It's on the Patreon page or in the Patreon Discord or whatever. Thanks for subscribing to Patreon, as always. Take it easy. Have a good one.